Hi there, this is Ron Yaish with Balance Financial Life here to talk about the emergency fund. And more specifically, having an emergency fund. What is it? What's the story with the emergency fund? And especially for somebody who is divorced or about to go through a divorce or is just divorced or in a divorce type of situation. Um, okay, so what is an emergency fund? So the thought is as follows. We wind up having a lot of things to manage. And one of the things that we don't manage well enough are the unknowns. Okay, so we may understand that we're going to have rent or a mortgage. We understand that we're going to have, to buy groceries and to take care of, clothing, etc. But what happens in case of what happens if there's an emergency? What if this breaks down? Or what if I need to replace that? I need to suddenly move and I have to pay another $3,000 for moving costs. I need to replace my car. The roof gave out. I have to spend $10,000. Whatever it may be, um, for an individual who is right now divorced and presumably single, right? You could have been divorced and now married, but for somebody who has a single income household or somebody who's trying to manage a household without a second income, um, you really want to consider working and managing and keeping an emergency fund. Okay, so what is an emergency fund? What do I do with it? And how do I make it work for myself, etc. Okay, so this is the way it works. If you were going to sit down, and I'm not telling you to get into all the details, but you could because that's part of financial planning, and we have other types of opportunities where we address those ideas. And before I go forward, Balanced Financial Life is a financial and money learning community. We're not here to make any recommendations. If you want to take any action, please seek the advice of a financial or tax professional before taking any action. That was our disclosure. Okay, so all right. So how do we figure out what the emergency fund is and what to do with it? So let's figure this out. Okay, how much do you spend on an average month on clothing, on groceries, on going out to eat? You make a list and you sit down and you take a look at your credit card bills, you take a look at your bank statements, you take a look at whatever it is that you wind up spending on an average month, your cell phone bills, your Netflix, coffee, Starbucks, 7-Eleven, 7-Eleven. This is not sponsored by 7-Eleven, although I wish it was, but I just happen to like their coffee. And you come up with a number. So let's just say that your number is $5,000, okay, or $7,000. So we'll use five because it's just easier to work with. So let's say your number is $5,000 you wind up spending on a monthly basis. Well, you should have a minimum, according to the financial gurus such as Dave Ramsey, who I'm a big fan of, and others. You should have 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund put away. And so that in this situation would be anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000 sitting in an account that you're not tapping into on a regular basis and specifically dedicated as the emergency fund, so that in the event that you needed to buy a new car or you needed to lease a new car, you may now have money to use. In the event that, there was a situation where you were out of work for a little bit, or somebody wasn't feeling well and you had to take care of them, and you had some, bigger expenses than expected. You needed to do $5,000 of dental work, right? Where's that money going to come from? So that's where you would tap into the emergency fund, right? In case of an emergency. It's not there to just go on the cruise. It's not there to just, get another piece of art in the house. Very specific, and dedicated money. Now, the average individual, the financial gurus of today have taught us, the Chris Hogans, the Rachel Cruzes, and the Dave Ramseys, that that you want to set aside the 3 to 6 months. But in my experience, wearing a different hat as the financial advisor when I'm not doing this educational piece and I am working with divorcees, what I have found is having closer to 12 months is really important. Now, you won't necessarily get there overnight unless you have that means to put that aside. But in our example where this individual was spending about $5,000 a month, that would mean having 5 times 12, which is $60,000, set aside in a separate account. Okay, so what do I do with this account? Is this an investment account? Can I buy a house with it? Can I use this as a down payment? The answer is no, no, and no. You cannot do anything with that money. That money is supposed to be there in the event of an emergency. Okay, so first thing you want to do is the thinking here is you want to put it into a savings account. So let's say you bank at a local bank, Bank X, Y, and Z. You want to go to Bank X, Y, and Z. You want to open up an additional savings account. And most banks today, if you have at least $50 in the account, they don't charge you for that extra account. So you put in some money and you start accumulating, or you put this money in from another account. And you start working on having this emergency fund. That's step one. Then I usually get questions from individuals, well, should that money be invested? Should I put it in the stock market? Should I put it into a CD? I'm not a big fan of putting the money into a CD because usually the CDs are 12 months, 18 months, 5 years that you lock it up, and they'll give you some interest for that ability for them to use that money during that time period because that's the deal, right? You're giving the bank the ability to use that money on the other end when they loan that money out. Doesn't mean that money's not there for you. It just means that for that it's locked up. So if you wind up tapping into it, you're going to have a penalty to take it before it's due. So that's why I'm not a big fan of putting money, emergency fund money into a CD. Do I put it into the stock market? Don't think that that's a good idea. Simply because when you need that money, what if the market had a dip and you needed the money? And not all of it's there. And what are you going to do? You're going to have to, that's going to be a challenge. So what I recommend is people put into a savings account. When it becomes significant, when it becomes, when you go over that $15,000 mark or even $10,000 mark, maybe you want to consider putting the money into an FDIC insured money market account. Some banks out there have it. I don't want to endorse one bank over another. I'm not getting paid for that, and that's not a recommendation. But there is a bank at this time that does exist that's called Capital One. They do have an FDIC insured money market account. Now, you may see a lot of banks have money market accounts. They're not all FDIC insured. To learn about what FDIC insured is, we have a different video with some more content on our website at Balanced Financial Life that you can go check out. What is FDIC insured? Is that something important? And basically, to explain it, it just means is that money safe? Under $250,000, is that money protected? No one could just take that money away from you if the economy went bad or whatever it is. So that money's a little more secure than just putting it into an investment. So if anything, I would look at an FDIC insured, make sure it's FDIC insured. If I haven't said that enough, FDIC insured money market account. So for example, I believe that the one I quoted, Capital One, I do think they have one, and they, at this point, November of 2019, I believe that they do, that they're giving something like 2%, which is pretty neat. So that's one approach. The other approach is if you have accumulated that 60,000, so maybe after 40,000, if you work with a tax advisor or your financial advisor, and it makes sense, and your situation is, in your situation, it may make sense to keep 40,000 in that money market account or in that regular savings account, and take the money above that, the 20,000 over that, and maybe invest it in some, mutual funds. Again, this is not a recommendation. This is just an idea. And the thought there is that unless there's a catastrophe, you probably won't need that 60,000 all at one shot. The emergency may be a 5,000 or a 10,000 or $20,000 emergency, but that you'll have that money available to you in that first part. And then the second part you could put away a little bit, but that's just an idea. Some people feel more comfortable if I would probably say, keep the money in that money market account. That way it's fighting off some rates of inflation. But the goal with the emergency money is it's not an investment account. The goal here is not to have growth. It's really to have as much protection as possible so you can have that money when you need it. Okay, so you open this account. Now, for some people who have good money habits, they just open the account in the bank that they work with. I do know some people who say, look, if I have that account in the bank that I work with, the minute I spend too much on X, I'm just going to tap into that money because it's there. I will have a hard time differentiating between money that's set aside that I can't use for an emergency and money that I need now and it's there. I'll just wind up spending it. I've heard that from people. And for some people in that situation, what has helped them and what I've heard and I'm sharing with you is that they sometimes open up a savings account in a different bank that they don't frequent, a bank that they don't log into all the time. They have access to it, so it's not money that's not accessible. It's just money that's one step removed. It just makes it a little harder for them to get to. It's not a typical place that they're going to log into. And just that action keeps that money just safer enough for, and kept far enough away at arm's length so that they have access to the money, but they don't necessarily tap into it when they don't necessarily need it, which is for the emergency. Now, the other thing is, should one feel guilty when an emergency comes up and they need to use the money? The answer is no. That's the whole purpose of the money. The purpose of that money is for you to use it. Another very typical question which comes up, and we do address it on our blog, balancefinanciallife.com. Well, if I have an emergency, shouldn't I just tap into my 401k? Shouldn't I just tap into my savings that I have for retirement? What's wrong with that? And there is what to discuss. I don't want to go into it here. It's beyond the scope of this conversation. But please let me know if you have any questions. I do my best. Our team does its best to respond to as many of the questions and the comments as possible. So please either respond, in a comment below, send us an email, reach out to us on whatever platform you work with, and we're probably there. And if we're not, please let us know so I could be there. So let us know what's going on. Today we focused on a divorcee and the importance of having an emergency fund. Again, emergency funds are not so exciting. It's very often the part of financial planning that people overlook, similar to insurance, because it's not something that's sitting right in front of you. And if it's not right in front of you, and I don't have that bill that has to get paid tomorrow, and it's not feeding my kid, and it's not something I need to take care of right now, it just, even though I may know it's important, it may get put on the back burner and may not get addressed. But it's something that, in the event that emergency comes up, it is a big deal. It really is a lifesaver from a financial point of view, from a physical point of view, from a mental health point of view, that you have that security that you're okay. And it's crucial to focus on building that up. Now, it may take you 4 or 5 years to get to that point where you're setting money aside. Getting to $60,000 after saving, and spending all your other money on your regular needs is not so simple. Now, again, you definitely want to seek the advice of a financial advisor and or a tax planner, because depending on your age, depending on what else is going on, depending on your other savings, for some, it may be just a portion of your positive cash flow a month. So if you have an extra $500 a month or an extra $1,000 a month after you spend, to pay for your various different expenses, what are you going to do with that extra $500? Okay, should that go to pay? This is beyond the scope, but should that go pay my mortgage down? Should I pay my other pieces of debt down? Should I save more? Should I put more money in my retirement? Should I put money into the emergency fund? These are very important questions. Not going to address it here. Just trying to whet your appetite, and come back and check us out so you can get these ideas. We can try to discuss more of these ideas. It's a pleasure spending time with you again. This is Ron Yaish from Balanced Financial Life. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.